Hey guys, so this is a continuation of chapter 6, section 1. This is getting ready for example 3, and this is actually talking about row echelon form, specifically reduced row echelon form, which you're going to see a little bit whenever we're talking about matrices. In your calculator, when you see this, you're going to see it as RREF. We did a little bit with this at the beginning of the year, but it's been a minute, so we're going to do some review on how to determine if something is in reduced row echelon form, and then we're actually going to apply this to matrices. So first off, there's 3 things that you need to know for reduced row echelon form. Whenever you are looking at a matrix or a system of equations, if you have a row that exists entirely of zeros, so in other words, it's nothing but a whole line of 0, 0, 0, 0, it has to be at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a visual here. So if I have a row of zeros, it has to be at the bottom of the matrix in order for it to be in reduced row echelon form. Okay, and a lot of times you'll see this as an augmented matrix as well. So you'll see that little dashed line like we talked about in the former example. All right, so the next thing it says the first entry in a row with non-zero entries is a 1. So that actually sounds a lot worse than what it is. It's the language of it that makes it a little difficult. But basically the very first number that's not a 0 is a 1. So if I have 0 and then 2, 3, 8, 5, this would not be in reduced row echelon form because the first entry that's not a 0 in this case would be a 2. But if I go through and I clear this out and I have 0, 1, 3, 8, 5, then that would actually put it in reduced row echelon form because the first entry that's not a 0 is a 1. Okay, the very last one says for 2 successive rows with non-zero entries. In other words, we're talking about something that's not just an entire row of zeros. The one in the higher row, the leading one, is farther left than the one in the lower row. So I would have something like 0, 0, 1, 2, 4. That would put this in reduced row echelon form. But if I had another row that was 0, 1, 5, 8, 6, then it would not be in reduced row echelon form because the row always that's higher up needs to have the one that's further left. So you want to make sure that if you have 2 rows that are stacked one on top of the other, that it's always kind of moving in a diagonal up toward the left. Okay, so for these, you're not actually putting things in row echelon form. You're just identifying whether or not it is in reduced row echelon form. So your answer is simply going to be yes, it is, or no, it is not. So this would be a good time to actually pause the video and see if you can determine these on your own. You do not have to, but it might be a good time to hit pause. Whether you did or whether you didn't, that's on you. But let's go through and work each of these real quick. Okay, on letter A, first off, does it have a row of zeros? The answer is no, it does not. So that means rule number 1 is not really applicable because there's not a row of zeros, okay? It doesn't say that it has to have one. It's just saying that if it does have a row of zeros, then it has to be on bottom. So the second thing is, okay, what about the leading 1? Well, if you look up at the top left, the first non-zero entry is a 1, and on that second row, okay, the first non-zero entry is also a 1. So we have 2 leading 1s here, which means we are good to go. Okay, the next thing is making sure that they are in that whole left diagonal, that the further up that you go in the system of equations actually keeps that higher row farther left with the leading 1. All of these things are true, so this matrix is in reduced row echelon form, and our answer would be yes. Okay, now on part B, you do have a row of zeros, and it is all the way at the bottom, so we're good to go on that. Okay, the second thing is, are each of the leading values a 1? So non-zero leading values, I have a 1, and another 1. So I'm good on that part. Each of the non-zero entries, the first non-zero entry is a 1. The next question might trip you up a little bit. If you look at it, you're kind of used to seeing an exact diagonal line. But all the instructions say is that the higher row, that leading 1, has to be to the left. So if you look between these 2 rows here, the higher row being this one up here, it is to the left of this value, meaning all of this lines up like it's supposed to, so it is in row echelon form. Okay, the very last one is letter C. You do not have a row of zeros, so that's not applicable here. But when I'm looking at my first non-zero entries, I do have 1, 1, and 1. We are good as far as that goes, but it does break the third rule, which states that it has to be staggered to the left. So this one is not in row echelon form. So on these, all you're doing is identifying whether or not it follows the rules or not. And that's it.